What's the next thing we're supposed to be doing?
Okay, so I guess we can start the actual episode now.
Can I press stop? Because this is just 20 minutes of just shit.
I'll just edit out the first part. It's fine. It's fine, Rich.
All right.
Maybe we can manage to do this episode in 22 minutes.
Okay, but this episode, right? Have we started now?
Yeah.
Okay. You said you wanted to talk about the Cainhurst Vilebloods,
Yes.
but we did an episode about the Sumerians already.
Yeah, but we didn't.
So I don't quite understand like how this Venn diagram works. Like,
Oh my God, Richard!
the Venn diagram is kind of a circle.
Why? Why are you testing me? Okay, focus. I will focus.
Okay.
So what we did is we did an episode on the Sumerians.
Yeah.
We did episode on the executioners, but we never actually talked about the Vilebloods in depth. So today we're going to talk about like the Vilebloods, but we're not going to really mention the executioner and the Sumerian stuff in detail because we already talked about it.
Okay, but I don't know like how
I
much
have questions.
is left. All right. Okay.
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 Pretend this is the beginning. Pretend like we haven't been talking. So today's episode is about the Bloodbloods.
Today's episode is about the Vilebloods, even though we've done an episode on Sumerians and an episode on executioners, which makes me wonder exactly how much blood is left in this stone. Like, I think it's pretty well covered, but you apparently have questions.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Okay.
I would recommend watching the videos about the Sumerians and the executioners and Maria and the doll and Lawrence and the moon presence before watching this. Because
I would recommend watching those, and if you still have any desire to listen to us talk,
yeah.
like after just one of those, you can listen to this one.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. And also Lance has a really cool stream on Cainhurst on Twitch.
Oh, his like cut
Yeah.
Cainhurst stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll link all of those in the description. And so we're just gonna cover Vileblood stuff that we may not have covered in the previous podcasts.
Okay, I don't know how long this is going to be because I think we covered most of it.
Have some positivity, Richard.
No, this is positive because it means this episode might actually like be concise and informative
Okay, awesome.
and not be 3 hours long.
Oh god. Since we already have an episode on the Sumerians, could you like super briefly tell me about the Sumerians and what their deal is?
Well, either they were people or they were created by the Great Ones. It's not clear like what their exact point of origin is, but they were this race of servants / guardians of the Great Ones. They lived underground in these tombs, and their job was just to oversee the tombs and continue to like expand the tombs because that's where the Great Ones were sleeping. They, with time, sort of rebelled against the Great Ones. Not really clear how that worked out because the Great Ones were apparently asleep at the time. So I think they just like were left alone so long they just formed their own society. They stopped being ruled by the Great Ones. They decided to have their own castes of like queens and elders, and they developed their own rituals and their own culture. And then with time, the more of the catacombs and the labyrinth and the tombs that they built, they just kept building it higher and higher and higher. And then over time, as they built more and their culture changed, they became the inhabitants of Yharnam and Cainhurst.
Awesome. So you said some of them became inhabitants of Cainhurst.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, what was the inspiration behind the Cainhurst area?
What, in real life or
Yeah,
in the game?
In real life, yeah.
In real life, it's the real life movie Dracula.
Mhm.
Yeah. The Cainhurst stuff is all vampire tropes.
Right, yeah.
Playing into the gothic horror, like you have Yharnam. Yharnam is where the werewolves are, and then Cainhurst is where the vampires are. And it's designed sort of so when you start off, it seems like, oh, this is a gothic horror story, so there's werewolves and there's vampires. But in actuality, they are both symptoms of the same thing, which is the labyrinth under Yharnam.
So basically, this is Underworld.
Yes.
Okay. And you know the actual castle? Who built it?
The people who live in Cainhurst, I imagine. We need to talk about Hemwick.
We'll get there.
But I think Hemwick is important to understand who built the castle.
All right, let's talk about Hemwick.
Because Cainhurst is the castle where the nobility lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hemwick is the city, like, immediately next to it. You have to cross a bridge to get there, and the bridge has been destroyed. But the implication that, like, isn't, like, no one outright says this, but it's implied, like, through area design and everything, that Cainhurst was the castle, the nobles lived in Cainhurst, then the serfs lived in Hemwick.
Oh, well, that was one of my questions, where it's like,
Yeah.
Is Cainhurst just a castle?
No, so, like,
Yeah.
the idea is that the thing about Sumerians is that they're matriarchal. They always seem to have a queen.
Mm-hmm.
And because, like, the source of the power of the Sumerian queen is that she bears the child of a great one. So there's a lot of emphasis put on women in Sumerian culture. And if you go to Hemwick, like, Hemwick it's a very, very, like, there's a, like, they're apparently, like, whoever runs Hemwick, it's not clear what her exact role is, but it's run by like a coven of witches who are all women. And then when you go into Hemwick, like, most of the enemies there are women.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way Hemwick is designed is, like, as you come into Hemwick, the men are outside Hemwick sort of protecting the village, and then as you go into the village, the women are there. But it's not like they're protecting the women who are huddled up indoors. The women are out there with, like, axes and cleavers and things.
Right.
So that seems to be a legacy of them being Sumerian, that there's, like, a very, very heavy emphasis on women in Hemwick.
And what kind of relationship did Cainhurst have with Hemwick?
Well, like I was saying, it looks like Cainhurst was where the nobles lived, and then Hemwick was where the serfs lived. So I'm guessing Cainhurst was probably built by people who, like, the ancestors of the people from Hemwick, that they just kept, like, they would have been the ones who constructed it. Alternatively, Cainhurst, because it's above, like, this is confusing because, like, we know that Yharnam is above the dungeons that the Sumerians built. And I'm pretty sure Cainhurst is supposed to be above it as well, because the dungeons are described as stretching out, like, you know, to the horizon. So it's possible that Hemwick was just built by the Sumerians. Like, they just kept building up, and then, like, one lot popped up and built Yharnam, and then another lot popped up and built Cainhurst.
Mm-hmm. And so, Cainhurst, Hemwick, Yharnam, are they all in the same country type deal?
Yeah, it's like Yharnam is the big city, and then on the outskirts of Yharnam, there's Hemwick, and then there's the village that became Forbidden Woods. We don't know its name.
Okay.
Forbidden Woods, like, used to be a village, but because it's cut off from the rest of Yharnam, it's, like, sort of just sort of holding together. Like, all the buildings are falling apart, and they've all been patched up with, like, bits of tar and wood from this forest around it, and, like, the people there just seem to live off hunting rabbits. They don't get like proper, they don't like trading like Yharnam is.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it looks like Yharnam was, like, the big urban area, and then you've got, like, Hemwick on the outskirts of Yharnam, and then further from Hemwick is Cainhurst. Like, it's the same area, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, you can walk between all three, and, like, not very long.
Mm-hmm. And people who live in the castle, they call themselves, or they are called Vilebloods.
Yeah.
So, why?
Well, this is the thing. We've had Loki on, and he's said, like, the Japanese stuff comes first, so, like, shut up in the comments. The reason Okay, in the Japanese script, they're not called the Vilebloods. They're called a word that's like the Cainhurst family or like the Cainhurst bloodline. They're not given that specific designation. The reason that they're called the Cainhurst Vilebloods in the English one is that it's trying to get across the notion that their blood is corrupt, which is a thing in the Japanese script as well, but it's less so in the English script. So I think the reason they call them the Vilebloods is that they're trying to communicate that just through the name rather than through other bits of dialogue. So yeah, they're called the Vilebloods because it's interesting because what happens is you talk to Alfred, and Alfred tells you that a scholar from Bergenworth brought old blood to Cainhurst, and that created the Vilebloods. The thing about Alfred is, like, he's not present for any of this stuff, so he's just relaying what he's been told. So one thought initially was, well, is that just entirely made up? Because Cainhurst has this extremely ancient, like, lineage to it. Like, this wasn't something that was created, like, 20 years ago. This is a very, very ancient royal family that goes back, hundreds of generations.
Yeah.
And then it became like, what's going on here? So the answer is that, and this is again down to cut stuff, which, like, I think we've said this before, but it bears repeating. The reason we bring up cut stuff is that it's not really cut, a lot of it. It's more like one piece of it was removed, but the other pieces are still there. So it's not like this thing was just very neatly excised and it's never mentioned again. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. There is a series of portraits in Cainhurst. One of the portraits is of a guy in a red, it looks like a monk's robe. No one knew who the fuck this guy was. And then when Lance and SanitySK were data mining Bloodborne, they found that, there's this completely removed character called Father Herbert. And he is wearing Herbert or Norbert, depending on which version of the script you have, because I think they hadn't decided. So Herbert/Norbert, Horbert. Father Horbert is wearing that exact same robe. Now, the painting is not of Horbert. It's of this other character who we never meet. But you can tell, like, he's from the Healing Church. And, like, even ignoring Horbert, like, the reason you can tell he's from the Healing Church is he's wearing this, like, wheel-shaped clasp around his neck. And that's something that the Healing Church servants, the Sumerian ones, wear. So he's from the Healing Church. So it looks like the story, like what they were trying to get across, and then it got sort of lost when they removed Horbert, is that the scholar from Bergenworth was someone from the Healing Church, and they brought the blood to Cainhurst, and that's what created the Vilebloods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also I'm pretty sure that painting is supposed to be Lawrence. Right, so I think and Lawrence is technically a scholar from Bergenworth.
Yeah.
So it looks like because Alfred wasn't there for any of this, he's just repeating what he's been told. So it seems like what happened was the Healing Church, or at least just Lawrence before he was like head of the... Actually, no, he would have had to be head of the Healing Church at the time. The Healing Church brought the old blood to Cainhurst possibly before they brought it to Yharnam. Or we don't know exactly what the timeline of this is. They brought it to... Actually, no, I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure this would have happened after the research hall period. We'll get into it later on. They brought the old blood to Cainhurst because they knew that the Cainhurst bloodline were the descendants of the Sumerian royalty. So they had very, very, like, they had more sort of dominant Sumerian traits. They were probably inbred. Mm-hmm. Like, they were closer to Sumerian, because Sumerians have, like, unique physical characteristics that are sort of, like, over time, I guess they were bred out. Yeah. It's not really, but, like, the people in Yharnam are also descendants of Sumerians, but they just look like normal humans. Whereas the Cainhurst bloodline, from what we see in, like, paintings and things, they had more Sumerian features to them. They had, like, very, 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 like, white, off-white skin. They had very, like, black pit eyes, and they had, like, extremely prominent cheekbones and things that you associate with the Sumerians.
Right.
And crucially, they had a queen, which is what the Sumerians had as well. So it looks like Lawrence, in his quest to find a child of a great one that he can beckon one with, he took the old blood to Cainhurst, and he gave it to them because he knew that would have a more potent effect on them than it would on just regular Yharnamites. Mm-hmm. So when they say the scholar from Bergenworth creates the Vilebloods, it means more like the scholar from Bergenworth brought this stuff to a royal family who were already Sumerian descendants. They were already they had been there for hundreds of generations in this old decrepit castle. And what the old blood did is it sort of woke up the sort of dormant Sumerian traits in them, and that's what creates the Vilebloods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. And could you talk about the corrupt blood?
Well, the corrupt blood it's just Sumerian blood, from what I gather.
Why is it called corrupt?
Well, the thing is, it's really not that clear, because Lawrence is experimenting with old blood in his research hall. But also, they make a big deal out of, Ariana, who is a character who's already in Cathedral Ward. She's descended from Cainhurst. So the idea is she's part of that royal family. She just doesn't know because she's several generations removed from it or something. And there's all this stuff in there about her blood is forbidden by the church, and if the church knew about her, they would kill her because her blood is so corrupt, and she can actually die if you bring Adela to Erden Chapel and then you take Ariana's blood. I think it's 3 times. Adela murders her. So it's not entirely clear what makes the Sumerian, or what makes the vile blood especially vile. Because the Healing Church have been doing shady things for a long time, but they seem to be very, very resistant to the Cainhurst blood. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible that it's to do with the whole vermin thing, that maybe the Cainhurst blood is more cursed. In the same, the way that the Yharnam blood becomes cursed, maybe Cainhurst blood was cursed as well. But that is in itself sort of odd, because the Cainhurst people aren't beasts. Mm-hmm. It's odd because there are monsters around Cainhurst that look like they used to be people, but they've turned into these weird things that the game doesn't consider to be beasts. It just considers them to just be monsters. So there's these gargoyle things, and then there's these giant flea monsters. But the game specifies there's beast type and kin type, and they're neither. So they're not beasts and they're not kin. Weirdly, there is an unused, not unused, but it's they don't really talk about it much in the game. There's another modifier that's not beast or kin that's just called righteous.
Yeah.
Some church weapons have it, and it does bonus damage to things in Cainhurst. So, it looks like there's kind of a third type that Cainhurst fit into, but they're kind of cagey about what it is and how it works. I think because, as is the way with Bloodborne, the stuff that they seem to focus on at the beginning and was a big part of the story to begin with is the stuff that suffered the most as it went on. Because it looks like Cainhurst was going to be a really, really significant part of the story at the beginning.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the retail version, it's become an optional area that sort of fills out the backstory, but also doesn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's how I've looked at the prototype versions of Upper Cathedral Ward, and that has in it all these paths and things that ended up being cut, but they were there from the beginning, and they were always working on them with the idea that Cathedral Ward would connect in this way. And then, even though that was I think one of the first areas they designed it went through all these different iterations and they kept working on it, that ended up being cut out anyway. It's really odd that the things that they spent so long on at the beginning are the things that ended up being removed the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in the Executioner podcast more, but at some point there was a raid on the castle.
Yeah, this is the second part of the sort of like partially, again, we're saying partially removed because it wasn't removed.
Mm-hmm. And
the church attacking Cainhurst story.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, before the attack, what was the relationship like between like Cainhurst, Bergenworth, Healing Church, and just like Yarnum?
Okay, I don't think anyone at Bergenworth knew anyone from Cainhurst at all.
Okay. Well, wait, no, but it's like if you live in that area, you know of the giant castle like right across the bridge from Hamwick? Must have heard about it.
But they don't mention it.
Who doesn't mention it?
No one mentions it.
Well, they must have known about it at some point.
But, like, they don't go there. Like, they make a point of going to this little coastal fishing village, but they never think to look in Cainhurst.
No, but what I'm saying is maybe they don't because they're like, oh, it's just Cainhurst, like our neighbors who live in a fancy castle.
Yeah, they may have known about it, not thought it was significant.
Yeah.
The confusing part there, though, is Maria.
Yes.
Because Maria is described, she is a distant relative of Annalise, and she is, like, we don't know if she's literally from Cainhurst or she's from around there, but she's related to Annalise, and she's got they make a point of, like, her sword is like the Cainhurst Chikage sword. And she presumably was at the Hamlet. Again, you don't see it, but it's implied she was part of the Hamlet raid with German.
Yeah.
So
it's like they must have been chill at some point. They must have known. She must have been like, yeah, I'm related to the chick in Cainhurst.
We also don't know exactly what the relationship between Bergenworth and the Hunters was at that point.
Yeah.
Because, like, Bergenworth it's an academy. It's like a bunch of philosophers and scientists. I don't know what role German has in that. And you can say, like, okay, the Hunters may have been like a mercenary group that they just employed for the Hamlet raid and didn't mention after, like they didn't know them beforehand. And like, okay, maybe, but then you have German calling Willem Master Willem in his sleep, which implies that like he may not mean like Willem is my master, but he may mean like that's like the formal title for him, like Professor Willem, he's Master Willem, whatever. So like he's calling out to Willem, so like he must know, like there must be some kind of relationship there. It's one of the more mystifying parts of the story that like you just have to sort of accept it happened, even though they never really explain like why. Like, you can come up with explanations, but the game doesn't really provide one. Like,
well, it kind of provides one.
What does it provide?
Okay, well, it says that Maria's cap was crafted in Cainhurst, right? Or whatever, her garb.
Yeah.
So it's just that people knew about Cainhurst, and Cainhurst was like the cool people in the region and the royalty, and that's it. And then at some point, Lawrence or whoever figured out that it's like, wait a minute, they're descendants of the Sumerians. And that's when the whole thing happened.
Yeah, but if you say that Lawrence is the one who brought the blood to Cainhurst, then that has to have happened after he left Bergenworth.
Yeah.
But he didn't come back to Bergenworth.
Why would he come back to Bergenworth?
No, but if he didn't come back, then like
everybody knew about Cainhurst. Like everyone knew Yarnum, knew Cainhurst were like the Kardashians of the region, so everybody knew about them.
Okay.
It's just that let's say Lawrence is the one that figured out, like, oh, Maria is cute and tall and pale, just like people in the labyrinth. Wait a minute. And, that he brought the blood to Cainhurst, and he was like, hey, are you guys descendants of the Sumerians? And the Queen's like, maybe. And then, the whole thing happened. And then there was a raid. And then there was this whole thing with the cut umbilical cord description.
Do you want to go into that then? About the raid and the... Okay, so again, they don't say this, but this is kind of clearly what happened. That the reason Lawrence gave Annalise the blood is because he wanted Annalise to conceive the child of a great one. And she did. And then after she conceived it, like at this point, I think the idea is Lawrence was saying to her, like, oh, we're friends. I'm looking after you. Because there is a fucking huge portrait of this guy in Cainhurst.
Yeah.
So like he was clearly someone that they knew and they trusted, and they revered him enough to put him like They put him, on the huge portrait of him next to, like, their knights and queens and things.
Oh my god! And then Queen Annalise goes, "Sorry, Lawrence, I have a boyfriend." And then executioners raid the castle.
That's exactly what happened. He's Lawrence the First incel.
Lawrence was just a little salty, and he was like, "Executioners raid the castle."
He's like, I guess it doesn't pay to be a nice guy these days.
Yeah.
So Lawrence and the church then, like, after Annalise gives birth to this child, Lawrence wants that child to offer it to the moon presence. As, like, because he realizes at this point that because he knows that the Orphan of Cos's third chord can be used to beckon things. So he realizes, okay, I need my own child of a great one to contact the moon presence with. So after Annalise gives birth to the child, Lawrence and, confusingly, like, the executioners, they then attack Cainhurst together. And, like, again, it's sort of in there, but sort of not. Lawrence absconds with the child. He takes the child to the old workshop, and the child dies, and that umbilical cord is used to call the moon presence. And again, like, this would have... I think I talked about this on I'm pretty sure I talked about it on the Executioner podcast, but it's one of those things I just don't understand the rationale behind. Because I don't know why they don't just say the church hunters attack Cainhurst. They, for some reason, decide that the church attack Cainhurst, but they attack them with the help of a bunch of, like, just guys that they find somewhere who are called the Executioners. And they're from a faraway land. And they just attack Cainhurst together. And, like, you can sort of go, okay, maybe they are, like, a group of, like, vampire hunters who've been hunting, like, Sumerian descendant people or something, and they found them, like, the church got in contact with them somehow and said, hey, there's some vampire stuff going on at Cainhurst, but I don't know. It's like, just say it was the church.
Okay. So... Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you, Castle Cainhurst and Cainhurst Castle, what's the difference?
They're the same thing.
Okay. And so after the castle gets raided, a few years pass.
I guess, yeah.
And then our hunter finds it.
Yeah, we don't know who broke the bridge as well.
Yeah, we do. It was the executioners.
Okay, do you want to talk about how Annalise can't die then? Because that seems to inform a lot of Cainhurst.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
So the raid happened, many years passed, and then our hunter finds an invitation to Cainhurst.
Do you want to talk about the invitation?
Yes.
Yeah. You go back to Yosefka's clinic, and the invitation is addressed to you, and it's just on a table.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any theories as to how?
No.
Okay.
Okay, do you want, like, the closest thing you'll ever get, and I'm not even sure it was intentional?
Sure.
What Imposter Yosefka will give you Numbing Mist as a reward for sending people to her clinic. And Numbing Mist is something that presumably, like, according to the game, only people from Cainhurst know how to make Numbing Mist. So you could say that Imposter Yosefka has something to do with Cainhurst because she knows how to make Numbing Mist. And maybe that's why there's an invitation there for you.
Okay.
Because she's trying to do something. But whatever it is, it doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And to get to Cainhurst, we have to stand next to this thing.
Yeah, it's like a crossing sort of obelisk thing.
Yeah, and then a carriage shows up.
Yeah. Out of nowhere, it just appears.
How does that work? Yeah.
It doesn't. It's a ghost carriage.
It's a ghost carriage, and then you get into
It's just a... Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just... There's a haunted, ghostly carriage pulled by dead... That's taken from Dracula.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like we mentioned Dracula before, the I'm talking about like the Dracula, the 1920s Universal horror film. There's a famous sequence in that where, like, in the Dracula story, like a carriage picks up Harker and takes him to the castle. But like, there's one of the more famous sequences in the Universal Studios Dracula is that Harker takes this carriage to Castle Dracula, and then when he arrives, he gets out of the carriage and looks, and there's no one driving it. It just went there by itself.
Whoa.
The thing is, like, when the carriage picks him up, the driver of the carriage is clearly just Dracula, like, dressed in sort of a different, like, he's wearing a sort of very bad disguise.
So being Dracula doesn't pay, so he's also like a carriage driver.
Yeah, it's like Uber for haunted carriages. So, yeah, Harker gets in the carriage, Dracula is driving the carriage. When he gets to Castle Dracula, he gets out, there's no one driving the carriage, and Dracula is waiting for him in there.
So he hopped off real quick, ran by the guy, and was like, wait, I gotta change.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. Yeah, it's to, like, underline that Dracula is supernatural.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everything is frozen when we visit.
Yeah.
Why? What does that represent?
It's cold. Okay, when I talked about it, I was like, oh, maybe it's because Cainhurst is frozen in time, and that's why the Altar of Despair revives Annalise, because it's about time. I don't think that anymore.
Good, because that was pretty dumb.
It was fucking stupid. Because back then, I was like, I had a different conception of the time frame of the game back then. Because, like, myself and a lot of other people were kind of assuming a much longer time span of the story, that, like, the Cainhurst stuff had happened, like, hundreds of years ago or something like that. And, like, you know, that, like, Yharnam had been, like, the Healing Church had been in Yharnam for generations or something. But the more that we've looked into it, the more it's like, no, it's more like this whole story has happened over the span of, like, 15 to 20 years, I think, is, like, the actual time frame we're dealing with. Yeah. So, like, I was saying that because when you go into Cainhurst, it's like you've just walked into the aftermath of this battle. And at the time, we were thinking, oh, well, did this happen? If this happened, like, hundreds of years ago, it's weird that the bodies are still fresh and they still have, like, stuff lying around. But, I mean, it was probably only, like maybe 5 or 10 years ago that this happened.
So it's frozen because it's winter in Cainhurst.
Yeah. I think that's also from Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is a movie, like, I think we'll have to talk about more. But there's a sequence in Brotherhood of the Wolf where they just find the aftermath of this, like, fight that's gone on at a castle in the winter, and there's all these, like, frozen bodies everywhere. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
And one of the first things we see are bloodlickers. What are those?
Yeah. Bloodlickers are, well, Bloodlickers look like they are Sumerians who transformed into these, like, flea tick monsters. Because if you look at them, like, their faces, they have Sumerian faces. They're just like a Sumerian that is morphed into this thing. They still have, like, human features on the Sumerian facial features. What they that's, like, the description of them. What they quote unquote are is it is like a Buddhist thing that it's not obvious to Westerners, I guess, that there's people who were, like, greedy and sinful in life. They get reincarnated as these things called the hungry ghost when they go into the afterlife. And the hungry ghost is like it's like a person who has a huge stomach, and because it's so huge, they can never be full. So they reduce to, like, crawling around eating anything they can find. And the idea is that because of that, they just start eating, like, disgusting things off the ground because they're so hungry. So they're eating, like, shit, and they're eating, like, vomit and stuff because they're in hell. Like, they're literally in hell. Okay. And they're in hell, and they're so hungry that they just have to eat, like bodily fluids and stuff that are just lying on the ground. So that's what the bloodlickers are. They're called bloodlickers because they're thirsty for blood, and they're, like, crawling around looking for pools of blood on the ground to sort of lick up with these very long tongues.
Okay.
And that's why you find them in the Hunter's Nightmare, because that's very Buddhist hell inflected area.
Right.
Yeah, and also like you can spawn blood lickers in the chalice dungeons if you perform a visceral attack on something and kill it, and then you leave and come back again. There's like it's like a 20% chance I think that a blood licker has appeared in the room, and it's like licking the blood off the puddle that you left behind.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I think the idea behind the blood lickers is that like they're Sumerians that they became so greedy for blood that they sort of transformed into these monsters that can never get enough blood into them.
And there's also what looks like vermin or whatever, those giant snake things.
Yeah, those maggots. Yeah. I think at this point you just have to say that they're vermin. You just have to say that like vermin is a catch-all term that encompasses all these different parasites.
Yeah.
So the centipede things, the maggot things, and the ticks on the snakes in Forbidden Woods would all be vermin.
And we have a whole podcast on vermin, which I will link below. And those vermin in the beginning, they hang out around what looks like a cave entrance.
Yeah, there's a collapsed area that I think that may have been where Cainhurst used to connect to the dungeons. Because it slopes, it could just be like a naturally occurring cave, but it sort of slopes downward and then stops. And I think like probably like, because the thing is Cainhurst is massive, but you only explore like the inner courtyard of it. If you stand on the balcony and look out, you can see that there's this huge like there's all these other parts of the castle you just never go to because it's too big. But yeah, I think the idea is that would have been how you got to that would have been like an entrance to the labyrinth under Cainhurst.
And I guess that's it for today. Because I want to do a separate podcast on the Queen of Vilebloods, and on that we'll talk more about the Queen, the cut content, and items and stuff relating to the Vilebloods.
Do you want to? Well, there's like ghosts and stuff in Cainhurst we haven't talked about.
But we talked about them in the Executioner podcast.
What about the rifle spear and the rider palish?
Oh, what about them?
Because you find a weapon in Old Yarnum called the rifle spear. And it's made by the Powder Kegs, who were Dura's group of hunters. And it says that this was made as in, it's like a bootleg version of a Cainhurst weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you find that weapon in Cainhurst, and it's like a more sort of like ornate, like the rifle spear is literally just a spear with a gun stuck to it. And in Cainhurst, you find the thing the rifle spear is based on, which is called the Rider Palish, and it's like this very ornate, sort of intricate rapier thing that can turn into a pistol. So the idea is that the church, like when they were attacking Cainhurst, someone stole a Rider Palish and brought it back, and the Powder Kegs built this rifle spear thing based on the Rider Palish.
Well, they didn't have to steal it. We've established that the Cainhurst bloodline were the Kardashians, so maybe they posted a picture of their weapons on Twitter, and then the Powder Keg saw it and then copied it.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, there's like all this like Cainhurst influence across Yarnum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll need to do an episode on the Powder Kegs.
I think that was it, though.
No, there's more.
Is there?
Yeah, like the whole burning of Old Yarnum, even though we did that already in one of the episodes.
Yeah, we've covered everything.
It's okay. They'll have their own episode. They're pretty cool. I really like the Boomhammer, mostly because of the name.
That's not theirs, though.
Wait, the Boomhammer isn't... Yes,
it is.
The
Boomhammer is the Odo workshop. Hang on, I have to check because I'm not sure. There's a thing called the Oto workshop that's meant to be like the pre-Powder Kegs workshop. Hang on.
Yeah, I know. I read the items. Not a complete idiot, Richie.
No, it's right. It was made by the Powder Kegs.
Oh! Looks like I schooled you once again!
You did, yeah.
Oh my god! Yeah.
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 Yeah, so that means that like the Powder Kegs were around at presumably the same time as the Oto workshop.
No? Why?
Because it says like the Oto workshop were the precursors to the Powder Kegs, meaning they came before the Powder Kegs.
Yeah.
but you find the boom hammer in the place where you find the Odo Workshop's badge.
So,
like, that means they were presumably around at the same time.
well, at some point, maybe, yeah, they had an overlap, or somebody, like, found the badge, and then they were like, oh, this is from the Odo Workshop.
Yeah, it's because it's like badge crafted by the Odo Workshop, precursor to the powder kegs, and then it's just like the powder kegs were driven by these ideas, and the philosophy of the powder kegs was established.
Yeah.
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 They didn't have to exist, it's just the ideas.
They don't have to exist because they literally only made one thing.
No, I mean, they didn't
which was the piercing rifle.
They didn't have to exist at the same time. It's just like the ideas went on, you know?
The idea of a gun.
Yeah. Whatever ideas they have, they survived through time. And then people were inspired by them and made the boom hammer.
The boom hammer.
I love it. It's my favorite name for a weapon in any video game.
Yeah?
Boom hammer. And it describes it perfectly. It's like a hammer and goes boom.
What about the BFG 9000?
What is that?
It's from Doom.
I only played the original Doom.
That has it in it.
Oh.
It stands for big fucking gun.
I don't know if I ever got that one. I remember walking around and getting a lot of cards, and like a red card is to open a red door, and green card is to open a green door. That's all I remember from Doom.
Yeah, it's called the BFG, which stands for big fucking gun. But then in the Doom movie, in order to make it suitable, they changed BFG to Bioforce gun.
They should have called it Big Friggin' Gun to make it PG friendly or whatever.
Was the Doom movie PG-13? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was pretty bad, I remember. I don't know why they had to make it all, like, nice. It wasn't very scary.
No, it wasn't. It's not very good, is it?
No.
Yeah, Doom movie rating. Oh, it's just giving me the Rotten Tomatoes rating, which is 19.
Sounds about right.
Oh no, it was rated R.
What?
It says here it's rated R for strong gore and violence. And language, but not the word fucking.
Wait, what? If that's rated R, what's our podcast?
It's NC-17.
What's that?
This means not classified, only suitable for people over 17.
Oh, that sounds about right.
Yeah, like I wouldn't want anyone under like listening to this anyway.
No, I agree.
Which children shouldn't be influenced by this. Yeah, if you're a child listening to this, I'm sorry. We're having a terrible effect on your development.
Parents put us on that thing, like the parental lock or whatever.
Yeah, there needs to be a parental lock to activate this podcast. It's a series of trivia questions about the 90s that you have to answer to prove you were alive at the time.
Yes.
Lots of like Limp Bizkit lyrics. Jokes about Yeltsin.
Oh my goodness. If you want to talk about, I have like a list of weapons here. Like the Chikage.
Oh yeah, okay, we can talk about the Chikage.
Okay, go.
Chikage is a katana.
Okay, so it says it's made in a foreign land.
Yeah.
So I already asked you, but not recorded. What do they mean by foreign land? Which land is it?
I don't know. Because I don't know from whose perspective that's supposed to be written.
Yeah.
Because Cainhurst is a foreign land.
Unless you're in Cainhurst and you're writing the description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the Rakuyo, I think the implication is it is from like a foreign land because the Rakuyo,
it was made in the same land as the Cainhurst Chikage.
Yeah, the same land as the Cainhurst Chikage. Now I'm saying Cainhurst. Look what you've done to me.
Yes, finally, because that's the correct way to pronounce it. Cainhurst.
Cainhurst, the Australian one. Cainhurst. Fucking going to Cainhurst. Get some tinnies.
What?
It's what we call beer cans.
But Chikage also sounds a little bit like Chicago.
Okay.
So, was it made in Chicago?
Do you... Well, that is a foreign land.
There we go.
Because it specifically says this originated in the same country as the Cainhurst Chikage, which is implying the same country is not Cainhurst. Otherwise, it would just say Cainhurst.
So, United States of America.
Yep.
There's also, I think you mentioned it, I guess, the thing I can't pronounce that starts with an R.
Rakuyo.
No.
Rider Palace.
Yeah.
Yeah, we already talked about that, though.
Then there's the Evelyn.
Yep.
What's up with the Evelyn?
It's a really fancy gun.
Any lore on it?
Well, I think it's like the Rider Palace, where Cainhurst, because they're just... Like, the Sumerians had guns. Like, if you go into the labyrinth, there's a bunch of Sumerians with guns. They were a technically, like, competent group of people. They had firearms. They had cannons. They had, like, revolvers and pistols and stuff. And rifles and all these different things. So, the implication is that, like, Cainhurst, they had... Because they were descendants of that, they had all these, like, interesting, like, firearm things that were a product of their culture, and the more complex, like, firearms in Bloodborne that were made by the church were the result of them stealing stuff from Cainhurst and copying the designs.
Okay.
The other thing is that they make a point in the game of, like, the strength of firearms scales with a stat called Blood Tinge. And the idea is that the firearms in Bloodborne, because they're not firing, like, quote-unquote normal bullets. They are firing this, like, weird mixture of quicksilver and blood. Because they're not designed to kill things, they're designed to, like, stun stuff. They're designed to... It's almost like a holy sort of attack that, like, you stop a beast by, like, shooting it with this combination of, like, blessed blood and silver and stuff. So, the reason that Cainhurst and the Sumerians love guns is that their blood is very, very strong. They have high blood tinge. So that's why they rely on these firearms. Like the Rakuyo is the only Cainhurst-associated weapon that doesn't scale with blood tinge. So the Chikage, the Rider Palace, and the Evelyn all use blood tinge. Mm-hmm. Because the Sumerians had very strong blood.
Mm-hmm. And in Japanese, blood tinge is called...
Blood quality.
Oh.
So it's like, this is how good your blood is.
Mm-hmm. What blood type do you think the Sumerians were?
Oh, I'm sure there's, like, theories. No, because if, like, people might know this if they, like, look at bios of video game characters in Japanese games. Like, Japan has a real obsession with blood types.
Ah.
They're really, like, whether, like, if saying someone is, like, an A or, like, a O or something is sort of, like, the same thing as people who say, like, oh, that's someone's star sign.
What blood type are you?
I don't know.
Me neither. I feel like we should know.
But there are, like, stories that come out of, like, they're not super common, but there are stories of, like, people saying, oh, I didn't get the job because my blood type was wrong. Because it's seen as, like, governing your personality.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if you look at, like I don't think they do this as much now because games don't really have manuals anymore. But, like, in old video game manuals, they would absolutely list characters' blood types because it was meant to tell you something about them. It would be like, you know, like if you had a list of people's star signs and then you said, like, oh, well, of course they act that way because they're an Aries or something. It's a similar sort of thing. So, like, I'm absolutely sure there's speculation about Sumerian blood types somewhere.
Oh, we should ask everybody who's still listening to guess what our signs are.
Why?
Why not?
All right, okay.
Yeah, you can have, like, a star sign, and then there's also the Chinese calendar sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to guess both for each one of us.
Well, won't they be able to guess the year we were born? Because haven't we mentioned
don't give
how
out
old we are before?
hints!
Okay.
And the code word is star sign. Yay!
All right.
And I think we're pretty much done with the podcast.
No, we didn't talk about the Chikage at all.
Oh, we'll talk talk about it in the Maria podcast.
But she doesn't use a Chikage. She uses a Rakuyo.
Okay, tell me about the Chikage. Bro, I'm on vacation. I'm like even less professional than usual.
Here's the weird thing about Cainhurst is that if you look at the visual design of the things that are in Cainhurst, they look like medieval, like medieval European, we'll say, knights. Like very, very heavy plate armor. They have like swords, and there are like guys on horseback that have like lances. But then you get the Cainhurst badge, and the stuff you unlock is like very sort of samurai-y. Like you have this sort of like thin armor that's designed to move quickly in, and you have a katana. So it's really odd. It doesn't quite jive. I don't quite know what the story is. Like maybe the Chikage and the armor were designed for something else originally, and they just got folded into Cainhurst. I don't know, but yeah. So it does specifically say that like the royal guards of Annalise use the Chikage, so presumably the others don't. And it sort of makes sense because the Keeper of the Old Lords has a similar kind of katana weapon, and one of the Shadows of Yharnam variants also has one. So it looks like it's possible that like when they talk about them being foreign made and being from another country, they may actually mean like the Chalice dungeons. But the other thing is that you have Old Hunter Yamamura, and he uses a Chikage, and he is explicitly described as he came to Yharnam from like the Far East. So it might also mean that they got these from the Far East, wherever that is relative to Yharnam. It's odd that like Yamamura uses a Chikage because he's not a Vileblood. He's just a guy from...
It's not odd.
Where do you think he got it?
No, if they're all made in the East, anybody can get them.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
God, did I school you again? Twice in one podcast.
Yeah. Well, we're doing this at a different time than we usually do it. Because this time, like, I've been up all day and you've just woken up.
Yeah, I'm fresh and I'm logical and rational. Whereas you need to be sleeping.
Yeah, destroyed with facts and logic. So the idea behind the Chikage is that it is a normal samurai sword, katana kind of deal, but the transformed mode of the Chikage is you kind of injure yourself with it, and then the blood goes into this is a thing that samurai swords had. They would have some, like the really ornate ones would have an engraving in the blade. So as the blade cut into people and it got blood on it, the blood would pool in the engraving. So you would get this like blood sort of scroll down the middle of the blade. And the Chikage is that. The idea is like as you're using the sword, your blood is going into the engraving in the blade. And that's making it stronger. So in its transformed mode, the blood on the Chikage, like it makes it scale with blood tinge. It's normally just scaling with strength and skill, but in the transform mode, because there's blood all over the blade, it's using blood tinge. And it also wears your hit points down as you use it, which is it's a Souls thing. It's been going since Demon Souls, where there'll be some kind of, it's always a katana. Like in Dark Souls, it's the Chaos Blade. In Demon Souls, it's the Makoto. It's a samurai sword that, while you wield it, it's eating away at you. So when you have the Chikage in its transformed mode and the blood is flowing into the blade and making it all like powered up, it starts sapping your life essence away. So you lose hit points as you have the Chikage transformed. The other thing about the Chikage is when it is in its like blood mode, it does rapid poison damage. So I think the idea is like the blood is acting as a kind of poison. I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, Sumerian blood is associated with rapid poison throughout the game. Like, Yharnam's blood does rapid poison damage to you when you fight her. And it also seems to be associated with the vermin, because when you fight the bloodletting beast and the vermin start crawling out of the back of it, they do rapid poison as well. So, like, you're sort of powering up the sword with corrupted blood when you use it. And, like, it scales with blood tinge. I don't know if it is literally supposed to be your blood or not, because I don't know where else it would come from. Basically, the animation when you transform it is that you shove it back into the scabbard, and then when it's shoved in there, there's this, like, burst of blood shoots out, and then when you pull the sword out again, it's red. So I don't know if, like that, if that's going into you, or there's just, like, a whole lot of blood in the sheath the sword goes into, or if, like, you do something to the sword and blood starts coming out the blade. I don't quite know.
But then you lose health when you use it.
Yeah, it's like eating, but that's happened since I don't know if that's to do with the blood, because that's not rapid poison damage. I don't really know. The confusing thing is, like, rapid poison in most cases would make more sense if it was called bleed. Because, because a lot of people probably don't actually encounter, like, rapid poison damage in Bloodborne, because most things don't do it unless you go into the Chalice dungeons. So rapid poison, like, the description of it sounds like it's, like, toxic in the Souls games, where it's poison but it's worse. But that's not what it is. It's actually like bleed in the Souls games, where, like, the bar fills up, and then when the bar is full, you just lose, like, 30% of your hit points. It's like a less punishing version of Frenzy. Yeah, so, like, it would almost make more sense as a bleed weapon, because that's, like, it's a katana. It does bleed damage, like the Chaos Blade does bleed damage, and the Makoto does bleed, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and, like, Maria, because, like, she does not like being related to Annalise, she has her own, like, samurai sword weapon, but it does not do the blood thing.
It's not it's not that she doesn't like being related to Annalise. It's just that despite being related to Annalise, she wasn't fond of the blood thing.
Yeah.
So maybe she was chill with being related to Annalise. Maybe they were best friends. She just didn't like the whole blood aspect of it.
Well, I don't know how you'd stay friends with Annalise if you weren't keen on the blood stuff, because she's kind of a single issue voter. Like, it's all
single issue voter.
Well, you know, the people in Bloodborne have a pretty one-track mind. It's just, like, blood everywhere, blood in cathedrals, and
Okay, and before I forget, I asked people to post questions about Vileblood stuff on Discord.
okay. I was unaware of this.
You're unaware of anything. I have a whole channel titled Questions for Podcasts, and people post questions there.
I don't get tagged in it, so I don't know.
Yes, you do, because I at everyone when I ask questions about a specific podcast.
I have at everyone muted.
On my channel?
On everyone's channel.
How?
I think everyone has at everyone.
No, go unmute it.
At everyone has at everyone muted.
No, go unmute it on my channel.
All right. Notification settings. All messages. Done. Okay.
Okay, and when I told you to go unmute it, I very, like, persistently pointed ahead, like, in an unspecified direction to let you know, like, go do it now. But you don't see.
Well, it'll be good if this takes off and we're able to, like, do an episode in the same room, because
oh my god!
I look forward to being pointed at and hit and have things thrown at me.
Oh my god! I'd be pointing on your screen, like, violently. I'd be like, tick 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 tick, go now!
Having you constantly clap in my face.
No, you're there. I could just, like, punch you in the shoulder.
Yeah, you could. Okay.
Well, listen, I'll be fair. First, I'll show you the circle, and then I'll repeatedly punch you.
That's fair.
Yeah. Clapped in my face.
No, I imagine you like clapping in my face like you're trying to get the attention of a cat or something.
Yeah, it's true. I do that to the microphone already. But that has a little different history because I started by banging on the table when I needed your attention, and then I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. So then I was banging on the side of the chair, the armrest.
Okay, as soon as I changed the notification settings, I've gotten like 7.
Good. Get used to it. And then I wasn't allowed to bang on the armrests anymore, so my boyfriend took away my chair, and now I have like a wooden chair without armrests. So that's why I was resorted to clapping.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. So, some of these questions were already answered.
Yeah.
So Princess Big Hat Marionette was asking about the origin of Cainhurst and stuff like that, so we talked about it.
Oh, is that Marionette to August?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, no, she dropped into a stream I was part of.
Nice.
And we talked for a bit, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so Princess War is asking who or what was Cainhurst? Is it a family name, a village? Why is the castle named after it?
The name, this is confusing because the name Cainhurst, if you saw it written down, you would think was the name of a place. In the same way that Hemwick is. Like, I guess it depends on where you live, but like where I live, I'm adjacent to like several places that have Hurst or Wick in the name. And a Hurst is just like, it means like a forest on a hill, basically. So if there was a town that was like near a forest on a hill, it would be called something Hurst. So like I live near a place called Bathurst. It's just like there's a place was near a forest, so they called it Bathurst. So like Cainhurst is like the name itself doesn't really make a great deal of sense because it would mean like there was a place called Cain, near like a forest somewhere, and there's no forests really around that area. Like it's a castle, it's on an island, but yeah, Cainhurst would be the name of a place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason they call it Cainhurst is because it's meant to suggest like the biblical Cain. Because like another influence is like we talked about the influence of the 1920s Dracula, but there's other like I think 20s or 40, the Universal Studios Dracula. I can't remember the exact year, but the there's a lot of influence of just like vampire sort of like legends in general. And one of the more popular, like not more popular, like one of the more vampire things you would that people sort of added onto vampire myths later on is that Dracula was somehow connected to Cain, as in Cain, the first murderer from the Bible. So in their sort of research of like different kind of vampire lore from around the world, they probably ran into that, and that's where the name Cainhurst, I think, comes from. The other possibility is it's to do with canis, as in like dog, because there's like a wolf motif through some parts of Cainhurst, so it might mean like to do with like wolves, and they changed it to It's confusing because Cainhurst is like half the time they're birds and half the time they're dogs, and they don't really settle on it in terms of like what they're. The Cainhurst symbol is like 2 wolves, basically. It's odd because the symbol of Cainhurst is these 2 wolves, which like wolves, dog, canis. Okay, that's maybe where the name comes from. But also there's like a lot of crow imagery around Cainhurst and also around Hemwick, so I don't know. And like you have the Cainhurst, but we didn't talk about the bloody crow.
We're not talking about him today.
But he's part of Cainhurst.
But we're not talking about him today.
Well, when are we talking about him? Because I don't think he can really sustain much of a discussion.
Oh my god, really? You really think that?
Yeah.
Did you think the lock shield could sustain much of a discussion?
But it didn't. It sustained like 2 minutes of discussion, and then the rest is just something else.
Well, that's what we're gonna do with the Cainhurst guy.
It's like Edgar. How like Edgar sustained like the first third of that, and then the rest was an ebook.
A very special ebook.
I still have it.
Oh man, yeah. I was thinking, you know how the Snack Covenant we release it once a week on like iTunes and Google Play or whatever for patrons.
Okay.
I was thinking of doing another thing and calling it like the classics and releasing our old podcasts once a week on like iTunes and Google Play and all that.
Some classics.
Yeah, just the classics.
Remastered at a higher bit rate.
No.
No.
That's what makes them the classics, is the bad quality and all the crap, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of other questions, but I think they're more for an Annalise podcast, and also I'm getting tired because I need a nap.
Well, I thought we would. Haven't you been up for like 3 hours?
Yeah, but it's vacation and I need naps. What, you thought we were going to talk about Annalise? No, Annalise is...
Well, you just specifically said Cainhurst, and she's kind of a big deal.
But no, she's Annalise. She deserves her own podcast.
She's the queen.
Exactly, that's why she needs her own podcast.
All right.
Yeah, treat the queen with respect, bro.
Okay.
Okay.
We didn't talk about how there's a whole lot of stuff from the Chalice dungeons in Cainhurst.
Yeah, it's because, we're going to have a whole episode on the Chalice dungeons.
Okay, we just said it then. There's a whole lot of stuff from the Chalice dungeons in Cainhurst. It's on the tables.
Yeah, but that's the thing. When we talk about Annalise, we're going to talk about the interior of the castle. Because that's her house.
So Cainhurst is an integral part of Annalise, except when it isn't.
What?
But we can't talk about Annalise on this podcast because she's the queen. She's separate. But on the Annalise podcast, we can talk about Cainhurst because it's where she lives.
Yeah, but only the interior. We talked about the exterior.
Only the interior. Oh my god.
Yeah.
This is so like...
It makes perfect
How
sense.
desperate are you? This is like the plot of someone who is desperate to get as many views as possible. How can I break this up? Okay, Cainhurst is going to be the exterior of Cainhurst, the interior of Cainhurst, the Queen of Cainhurst, probably Ligarius because why not, and also like one guy from Cainhurst who shows up without warning. And we're going to somehow get 5 separate podcasts out of one extremely small and unfinished area.
No, in my head it made perfect sense where the Cainhurst, this is the Vileblood podcast. So in my head it made perfect sense.
What's the difference?
That the Vileblood podcast would be about the castle and sort of little bit connecting Sumerians to the Vilebdloods as a reminder, because we already do that, and just talking about the relationship of the castle with the other areas, sort of. And then we'd have a separate podcast, which is Annalise, and because she lives in the castle, so she probably cares what it looks like on the inside, we should talk about the inside of the castle and the queen.
She's gonna get a decorator in.
What?
She cares what it looks like. She's gonna get it decorated. She cares what it looks like on the inside. It's literally just like piles and piles of statues.
Well,
arranged with like no sense of order to them, just piled everywhere.
Well, maybe this
and then literally a gigantic pool of dried blood directly in front of her, and she just sits there all day staring.
Well, maybe this is sort of, we will be able to look into her personality based on how the castle looks.
She's also blindfolded, so how would she know what the castle looks like?
She knew what it looked like before, okay?
Do you think she doesn't realize anything is wrong?
Maybe she's blindfolded.
She just hasn't seen anything. Yeah, she doesn't know that Ligarius is out there.
Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she thinks she's just sitting in her room or whatever. Everything's fine. She's just sending off invitations to her fancy ball, but nobody's showing up. Or maybe she thinks the statues are people, right? So she's like, oh, hey.
Or she just walks around touching them, and she's like, oh, there's a person.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I just
she's
pictured.
Like, you're not allowed to talk to me because I'm too important. Good.
Yes, exactly. So she's good. She's happy.
Yeah.
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 So that is why she deserves her own podcast.
Okay.
As well as the interior of the castle.
I just read we've also done a separate one on the executioners.
Yeah, we did.
And just, yeah. Look at how much like we're able to get out of this just tiny because we can't stay on topic. And
I think we stayed on topic pretty okay this time.
we did. That's the depressing thing we did, and it was still over an hour long.
Yeah.
We got an hour of content out of some snow, a big flea, some worms, a portrait, and a sword, and some people who had to go to a medieval castle to get the idea for a gun.
Yeah, and I wasn't even paying attention to the last half of the podcast because I was thinking about pina coladas and mojitos.
I don't think anyone is I think even the people listening have stopped paying attention.
I hope so. So when I go to the woods, I'm gonna get some alcohol and I'm gonna make pina coladas and mojitos.
Are you going to do a stream from there where, like, every time something happens, you have to take a shot, and by the end, you're completely hammered?
No, it does. The woods doesn't have really good internet.
Oh, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Australian internet.
My boyfriend just went, the woods has the Australian internet.
I'm sure it's much better.
Richie said, I'm sure it's much better.
I don't think so.
Aww.
At least for now.
But they might get fancy internet in a couple of years, so... Okay. So I think we did it. And it was only an hour long. Unlike the Sumerian podcast.
Yeah. How long was the Sumerian
It
one?
was like 3 hours, and I don't even
Jesus.
know how. I don't understand. Gonna have to edit it. I'll edit it on my vacation. Try to make it into something listenable.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I, like, finally got rid of all of the backup the Audacity project files that I've been building up over the last year.
Oh snap! Did it?
It was like 180 gigabytes, and I couldn't even put it in the recycling bin. It said we just have to delete this right away.
Oh my god! The computer was like, "This is horrible. I have to delete this right away."
Yeah, it was like this. we can't risk you undeleting this.
Yeah. Oh snap! So, do you want to do the outro?
Okay.
Yeah.
That was one in a series of 17 podcasts we'll be doing about Cainhurst. Stay tuned for the next episode where we discuss the unused lower bridge that you can kind of see if you pan the camera over the side. Should be able to get about 45 minutes out of that. And perhaps like a discussion about how the gate opens by itself as you approach. What's going on?
You know what? We'll talk about that in the Annalise podcast.
Do you think she's opening it?
Maybe she is. She opens it real quick to make it mysterious and then runs up back to her room.
How does she know we're coming if she can't see us?
Well, the carriage is equipped with like a GPS or whatever, and it transmits
see.
signal directly to her helmet or whatever she's wearing.
You think that like the invisible coach driver like just sends her like a text message like I'm outside.
Yeah.
This is your haunted carriage Uber, I'm outside.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually like the idea that she's wearing the mask, but on the inside of the mask, she has like a whole like futuristic screen type deal where she can see everything.
It's like Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was supposed to be the outro.
You know, I can do this face where it looks like I'm deflating my chin and it's like disappearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe if we upgrade to a vodcast.
Yeah. And that's the sound I make as I do the face.
We'll become one of those terrible channels that keeps doing like 4-hour-long Google Hangouts.
I didn't even think about that.
Oh no.
But now that you mention it.
I need to stop being sarcastic with you because you end up thinking it's good.
Yeah, and then we end up implementing it.
Well, it's more like you end up implementing it without asking me, and then it's just like, that's happening now.
Yeah. Alright. Did we do an outro?
I think this is the outro. Are we going to do a shout out in this episode?
Oh, I forgot about the shout out. Yeah, let's do a shout out.
Who to?
I don't know. Think faster.
Okay, I'll shout out. I'll shout out to my friend Mark because
Okay.
we shouted out to Piku in another episode. Mark, Piku, and I are mutual friends. We hang around each other's stuff.
Don't be silly. You have no friends.
Well, that's true.
Okay, shout out to Mark.
Okay, yeah, Mark is a streamer and he's also an artist, and he streams video games and also streams his artwork. Mm-hmm. You can find his streams at twitch.tv/the32 as one word, so that's spelled out, so it's TheThreeeTwo. And he also has a website for his work that is really hard to find because he's referred to as Third Half, which he renders as a 3 and then a 2 after it. Mm-hmm. And so, as you can understand, that's quite difficult to Google. And I actually can't remember like what the URL of his website is. Hang on. I can find it because he's the one of 2 people in the English-speaking world who cares about a game called Speed Power Gunbike. So if I Google that, I will eventually find his website. Oh, there it is. It's literally faster than trying to remember the URL is to Google Speed Power Gunbike. His website is thirdhalf.net, so it's just third half written out .net, THIRDHALF.net, and he has all his art and video game stuff there.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he does commissions if you want like stream emotes or overlays or stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, they look pretty good.
And he listens to this sometimes, so he might hear this.
Oh, nice. Oh, he has a Slayer thing. I know this because my boyfriend made me watch an episode.
Yeah, he's very, very into Slayers.